The wind on the mining outpost always carried the sound of emptiness. John lived alone in the metal shelter that stood between the barren rocks and the endless night sky. Every day was the same: machines humming, dust storms howling, silence. Waiting to crush him, he thought he had seen everything this world had to offer, until one evening changed everything. On his way back from the old supply shed, John heard a sound he had never heard before. It was soft, almost like a cry, hidden behind the rocks. He stopped, his heart beating faster. No one was supposed to be here. No miners, no travelers, only him. He followed the sound carefully. Holding the small light in his hand, the beam cut through the dust, and there, half hidden under broken cargo sheets, he saw them. At first, he thought it was some strange animal, but then the shapes moved, and he realized it was not one, but two beings, a tall, thin figure, shaking, holding a smaller one close. The smaller one whimpered. Weak and hungry, the taller figure raised its head, and John saw eyes shining in the dark. Not human. The skin was pale with faint blue patterns. The hands long and fragile. The figure pushed the child behind her, as if ready to protect it. Even with no strength left, John froze. His mind racing. Aliens. Every miner had heard stories. And the law was clear. If you found them, you reported them. Aliens were dangerous, untrustworthy, and helping them was forbidden. But what he saw did not look dangerous. It looked desperate, weak, and afraid. The child's thin fingers clutched at the mother's arm, and John felt something stir inside him. He remembered when his sister's baby cried with hunger back on Earth. That same helpless sound, that same tiny voice begging for life. The mother alien tried to speak, but her voice was broken. It was not words he knew, only sounds of pain and fear. Still, John understood the meaning. She wanted him to leave, to stay away, to not harm them, but he could not move. He could not walk away. He reached into his bag and pulled out the ration bar he had saved for dinner. Slowly, he placed it on the ground and stepped back. The child's eyes widened, smelling the food, but the mother held the child tight. Not trusting. John waited, his heart pounding, the silence heavy. Finally, the mother reached out, shaking, and took the ration bar. She broke it and gave the smaller half to the child. The child ate quickly, crumbs falling. Eyes bright with sudden energy, John felt his chest tightened. They were starving. They were not soldiers, not monsters. Just a mother and child, lost in a world that hated them. That night, John could not sleep. He sat on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. He knew what he had done was dangerous. If anyone found out, he could lose his job, maybe even be sent back to Earth in chains. But when he closed his eyes, he saw the child's thin face. The way it lit up when it ate, he saw the mother's tired eyes, filled with fear, yet still strong enough to protect. And he knew he would go back. The next day, John carried an extra ration with him. He pretended it was normal, just part of his routine, but his steps were faster, his mind already at the hidden place when he arrived. The mother and child were still there, weaker than before. But waiting, he set the food down again. And this time, the mother did not hesitate. She looked at him, eye searching, as if trying to understand why he was helping. John gave a small nod. No words, just a sign of peace. The child smiled. The first smile John had ever seen from an alien, and something inside him changed forever. Days passed, and every day he brought them food. Every day, the bond grew stronger. He did not know their names, but he knew their pain. They no longer hid when he came. The child even reached out to touch his hand one evening, small fingers brushing against his glove. John almost pulled away, but then he let it happen. The warmth of that simple touch told him he had made the right choice. Still, danger was always close. Patrol ships scanned the skies. Miners moved cargo across the desert. If anyone discovered the mother and child, it would all end in blood. John lived in fear, but also in hope. For the first time in years, his life had meaning again. Each night, he asked himself the same question. Why am I doing this? The answer was simple, even if it made no sense, because they needed him. Because no one else would help. Because deep down, he believed kindness was stronger than fear, and yet he knew the day would come when this secret could not last. The day when he would have to choose to walk away and forget them, or to risk everything for them. For now, he fed them one meal at a time, not knowing that soon this choice would change his life forever. The desert sky stretched wide above the mining outpost, endless and cold. John carried his pack across the rocks, the sound of his boots crunching in the dust. The wind whispered around him, carrying secrets of the empty world, but his heart was not empty anymore. It beat faster with every step because he knew who was waiting for him. The mother and child were hidden in the same hollow behind the broken cargo sheets. When John arrived, the child's eyes lit up at once. A sparkle of recognition. The mother sat weakly, but her shoulders straightened when she saw him. She no longer tried to push him away. She no longer raised her hands in defense. Instead, she watched him closely, cautious but less afraid. John placed the food down gently. This time, more than before. He had traded one of his spare tools for extra rations at the depot. He told the officer he needed the food for long shifts. No one asked questions. No one knew his secret. The child reached for the meal eagerly, but this time looked at John. First, it was as if asking permission, or maybe saying thank you without words. John gave a small nod, and the child began to eat. The mother broke her share slowly, giving pieces to the child first. Always the child first, always her protector. That sight made John's chest ache with something he had not felt in years. The days turned into a quiet routine. John would work his shifts, fix the old mining machines, carry heavy crates, and at night, when the stars came out, he would sneak away to the hollow. There, the silence was not lonely anymore. The silence was alive with the soft breaths of the mother and child. The child began to smile at him more often, a smile filled with light. It tried to mimic his gestures, waving its hand when he waved, even copying the way he tapped his chest. When he said, "John," soon the child was tapping its own chest, making a sound. Its name, John could not understand the word. But he repeated it. The child laughed, a sound like soft bells. The mother's eyes glistened. Perhaps with pride, perhaps with hope, one evening John brought a small tool. A broken scanner he no longer used. He handed it to the child, who turned it over with fascination. Tiny fingers pressed the buttons. Though the machine no longer worked, still, the lights flickered faintly, and the child's joy filled the air. The mother watched carefully, but she did not take it away. For the first time, John felt trusted. Yet trust came with weight. Every time he left the hollow, John looked over his shoulder. What if someone followed him? What if the patrols scanned the rocks? He began to dream of alarms, of officers storming into his shelter. In those dreams, the mother and child were taken, and he was dragged away in chains. But every morning, when he woke, he reminded himself why he continued, because without him, they would not survive. One night, a storm rolled across the desert. The winds howled, carrying sheets of dust that cut into skin. John fought through it, covering his face with cloth, clutching the pack of food. When he reached the hollow, the cargo sheets had almost torn away. The mother huddled over the child, shielding it from the storm. Their bodies shook, dust coating their fragile forms. John dropped to his knees, pulling the sheets back into place, pressing them with heavy stones. He wrapped his coat around the child, ignoring the cold that bit his own skin. For hours, they stayed together as the storm raged outside. The child clung to his arm, trembling, but alive. When the winds finally calmed, the stars appeared again. sharp and bright. The mother looked at John, her eyes soft, filled with something new. Not just caution, not just need, but trust. Real trust. From that night, their connection grew deeper. The child began to wait for him, running forward when he appeared. Its steps still weak, but its laughter strong. The mother no longer avoided his gaze. She met his eyes. Sometimes she even made a sound. A soft note of acknowledgement. It was not his language, but he understood the meaning. A thank you, a greeting, a bridge between two worlds. Still, questions haunted John. Where had they come from? What had they lost? Who hunted them? The mother? Never spoke of it, never pointed beyond the stars again. But sometimes, at night, John saw her staring upward. Her arms wrapped tight around the child, her face filled with sorrow. He wondered if she had a home once, a family, a place where she was safe. Now that place was gone, and all she had was him. That thought made him clench his fists. He had promised. Nothing but inside. A promise was already growing. He would not let harm come to them. The days grew shorter, and his food supplies thinner. He gave up his own meals more often, his stomach tight with hunger. But when he saw the child eat, when he saw strength return to its small frame, it was worth it. Each bite they took was a victory, a defiance of the cruel rules that demanded he let them die. One evening, as John prepared to leave, the child tugged at his sleeve. It pointed to the stars, then to him. Then pressed its small hand to his chest. John's throat tightened, because he knew what it meant. It did not want him to go. It wanted him to stay. The mother watched silently, her eyes full of unspoken words. John touched the child's hand. Gently, then shook his head. He whispered, "Tomorrow." Though he knew they could not understand the word, but they understood the promise. The child nodded, its eyes bright. The mother lowered her head in quiet relief, and John walked back into the night, carrying the weight of their hope and the beginning of something he could not yet name. The days turned into weeks, and John's secret life grew heavier. He worked at the mines by day, carrying metal, fixing engines, speaking little. By night, he crossed the desert to the hollow. Where the mother and child waited, it had become his only reason to keep moving, the only light in his dark routine. But deep inside, questions began to burn. Who were they? Why had they come here? And what did they fear so much that they hid like shadows? The mother spoke little, only soft sounds. He could not understand, but John had learned to read her eyes. When the child played, her eyes softened. When the patrols passed overhead, her eyes hardened, filled with fear, sometimes in the middle of the night. John caught her staring at the sky. Her lips moved in whispers, words of a language that carried grief. It was clear she had lost more than food, more than a home. She had lost a whole world. One evening, John brought a small lantern. The hollow lit up for the first time, casting shadows on the rock walls. The child clapped, delighted by the sudden glow, but the mother flinched, pulling the child close. Her eyes darted around, filled with alarm. John frowned. Lowering the lantern, "Safe," he whispered, pointing to the rocks around them. "No." "One here," but she shook her head, pointing upward, then outward, to the horizon. Her hand trembled as if pointing toward unseen hunters. John felt a chill run down his spine. That night, as the child slept curled against its mother, John stayed. Longer. The air was cold, and silence pressed on them like weight. At last, the mother raised her hand and traced shapes on the dirt floor. A circle for a planet, lines for ships, stars scattered like dots. Then she drew fire. Long streaks of destruction across the stars. Her hand shook, and tears shone in her eyes. John understood, even without words. Her home had burned. Her people had fled. Hunted across the skies, she and her child were survivors. Refugees lost in the galaxy. John leaned back, staring upward through the broken sheets of metal. He had always thought of aliens as threats, stories told by miners after too much drink. But here was the truth, raw and silent. They were no different from humans. They ran when hunted, they cried when they lost. They protected their children with their last breath. That realization settled heavy on his chest. He was not just feeding them, he was carrying their last hope. The next days only deepened his questions. Sometimes the child pointed at the stars, making soft sounds like names. Other times it drew small shapes in the sand, repeating the same pattern, a broken circle, as if showing something incomplete. John tried to copy the sound, tried to copy the shape. The child laughed. Correcting him with tiny hands, the mother watched, silent, but her eyes softened. It was as if she wanted her child to remember, to hold on to fragments of a lost past. But danger crept closer one night while John returned from the hollow. He saw a patrol light sweeping across the desert. He threw himself flat, heart hammering. The ship scanned for heat, for signals, for movement. If they found the hollow, if they found the mother and child, it would be over. When the patrol finally passed, John lay in the dust, trembling. He knew the secret could not last forever. The next evening, he warned the mother with gestures. He pointed to the sky, made the sound of ships, then crossed his wrists in warning. Her face turned pale. She understood. She pulled the child closer, rocking it gently. For the first time, John saw her break. Her strong eyes filled with tears. She whispered into the child's ear, a lullaby full of sorrow, and John realized the truth. She did not believe they would survive. That night, he could not sleep. He sat in his metal shelter, staring at the walls. The law said he should report them. The law said humans must protect themselves first. But his heart said otherwise. If he left them, they would die. If he stayed with them, he risked everything. His job, his freedom, even his life. Still, the choice felt simple. When he closed his eyes, he saw the child smile. He heard the soft, bell-like laughter. He remembered the mother's trembling hands, still strong enough to feed her child before herself. How could he abandon them? How could any human call themselves human if they did? On the seventh night, John brought not only food, but blankets. He spread them on the ground, covering the mother and child against the cold. The mother looked at him with wide eyes. Confused, John placed a hand over his chest, then pointed at them. He spoke slowly, clearly. "Safe," he said. "I will keep you safe." She did not know his words, but she knew his meaning. Her eyes shone, and she bowed her head in silent thanks. The child curled into the blanket, smiling as it drifted into sleep. John sat beside them, staring at the stars above. He wondered who hunted them. He wondered how long before those hunters came here. But one truth burned brighter than all others. He was no longer just a miner. He was their protector, and in protecting them, he had found a piece of himself he thought long lost. The mining outpost was never truly quiet. Engines roared in the distance. Patrols swept the skies, and radios crackled with cold orders. But inside John's chest, the noise was worse. His secret grew heavier every day, and the weight of danger pressed closer. Each morning, his rations felt lighter. He gave more food to the mother and child, saving less for himself. His stomach growled during long shifts. His hands shook while repairing machines. But when he saw the child's small face brighten with each meal, the hunger became easier to bear. Still, he knew it could not last. If anyone noticed his weakness, questions would come. If anyone followed him into the desert, everything would end. One afternoon, the foreman shouted at him, "You're losing." "Wait, John, eat better. We need strong hands." John forced a smile, nodding. Hiding the truth behind tired eyes, he could not explain. He could not reveal the secret he carried. So he worked harder, pushing through the ache in his bones. That night, he returned to the hollow. The mother was waiting, her eyes watching the shadows carefully. The child ran forward, laughing, arms outstretched. John caught it gently, lifting it for a brief moment. The warmth of that embrace reminded him why he kept risking everything. For this fragile joy, for this bond stronger. Then law, but danger crept closer, sharper each day. Patrols flew lower now, scanning the barren land with stronger beams. One evening, as John approached the hollow, spotlight passed over him. He threw himself to the ground. Heart thundering, dust filled his lungs. The light lingered, then moved. On too close, far too close. He crawled to the hollow, shaken, and the mother saw his fear. She clutched her child tighter, whispering in her strange language. Her eyes met his, filled with the same thought. Time was running out. The next day, food trouble began. The depot had cut rations due to a supply shortage. Workers grumbled. Fists slammed on tables. Voices rose in anger. John stood in line. His turn approaching when he received his smaller share. He felt the chill of panic. It was not enough for 3. Not even enough for him alone. Still, he carried it to the hollow that night. He handed nearly all of it to the mother, keeping only a scrap for himself. The child ate quickly, joy on its face, unaware of the cost. John sat in the shadows, stomach empty, but heart steady. Yet sacrifice could not hide forever. The foreman soon noticed John's weakness again. "You sick, John?" the man asked, eyes narrow. John shook his head. "Just tired." The foreman studied him but said nothing. Suspicion hung in the air one night. As John approached the hollow, he stopped suddenly. Footprints in the dust, not his own, fresh and sharp. His blood turned cold. He crouched low, creeping forward. When he entered the hollow, relief washed over him. The mother and child were safe. But they too had noticed the tracks. The mother's eyes darted. Her body tensed like a cornered animal. John pressed a finger to his lips, warning silence. Then he smoothed the ground, erasing the marks, but his heart could not erase the truth. Someone else had been close. That night the storm returned. Winds howled, carrying grits sharp as knives. John stayed with them, holding the metal sheets in place. The child clung to him, its small body shaking. The mother huddled near, eyes full of quiet trust. When the storm passed, John stared into the endless sky. He knew the risks were no longer far away. They were closing in, step by step. The following weak whispers spread among the miners. Talk of strangers spotted near the ridges. Some claimed to have seen shadows moving where no man should be. Aliens, one miner spat. Vermin should be reported, should be burned out. John kept his face calm. But inside his chest, fire raged. He wanted to shout, to defend, to scream that they were not vermin. But silence was the only shield he had. That night, when he returned to the hollow, he sat longer than usual. The child curled in his lap, soft. Breaths of sleep warming his arm. The mother leaned against the rocks. Her tired eyes never leaving him, John whispered. Though he knew they did not understand, "I'll protect you, no matter what." The promise burned in his voice, stronger than fear. But promises carried weight, and John felt that weight more. Each day, his body weakened from hunger. His job pulled him thin, and patrols grew sharper. The net around them was tightening. The mother knew it. John knew it. Even the child sensed it. Laughter came less often now, replaced by quiet clinging. Every sound in the night felt like footsteps. Every light in the sky felt like a hunter. One evening, as John left the hollow, the mother reached out, her hand touched his sleeve, trembling. Her lips moved, forming a sound soft and broken. It was not his name, but it was something, a word heavy with meaning. A word like trust. John stopped, his throat tight. He placed his hand over hers, nodding slowly. And in that moment, he realized the risk had already become a part of him. There was no turning back, no safe escape. Their fates were now bound together. And whatever storm came next, he would face it with them. The nights grew colder, and the desert winds carried a sharp edge. John wrapped his coat tighter as he walked toward the hollow, the pack of food heavy on his back. But tonight, something felt wrong. The air was too still. The silence too deep. His steps quickened, fear pressing on his chest. When he entered the hollow, his breath caught. The child lay curled against its mother, trembling, its small face pale, its eyes half closed, lips dry. A weak cough escaping its chest. The mother rocked it gently, whispering soft sounds of comfort. But the fear in her eyes was clear. The child was sick. John dropped to his knees, heart pounding. He touched the child's forehead, and heat burned against his palm. Fever, the kind that spread fast, the kind that killed without mercy. The mother's eyes searched his desperate, pleading. She did not need words. Her meaning was clear. John sat back, his mind racing. There was medicine in the depot, but it was meant for humans. No one knew if it would work on alien blood, and if he took it, questions would follow. If he was caught giving it away, the punishment would be swift. Still, he looked at the child, weak breaths rattling in its chest, and he knew the truth. He could not stand by and do nothing. That night, he returned to his shelter. Pacing the floor, his mind tore between fear and resolve. Finally, he opened the locked supply box. Pulling out a small vial of fever medicine, he stared at it for a long time, the liquid glowing faintly under the light. This was more than food, more than blankets. This was a step that could not be hidden, but his choice was already made. The next evening, he carried the vial in his pocket. When he reached the hollow, the mother's eyes widened at once. She saw the glass in his hand, her body stiff with shock. John knelt beside the child, who coughed weakly. He lifted the vial, speaking softly. "Help," he said, pointing to the medicine, then to the child. The mother shook her head at first, fear flashing in her gaze, but then the child's body shook with another cough, a sound too small, too fragile. Her resolve broke, and she gave a small nod. John opened the vial carefully. Pouring a few drops into water, he pressed the cup gently to the child's lips. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly the child swallowed, eyes fluttering as if fighting to stay awake. The mother held it close, rocking gently, whispering in her strange tongue. John sat back, every muscle tense. Would it work? Or had he made it worse? The hours crawled by. Long and heavy, John stayed with them, refusing to leave. At last, the child's breathing steadied, the harsh cough easing. Its small body stopped shaking, sinking into quiet sleep. The mother's shoulders sagged with relief. Tears sliding down her face, she reached out and touched John's arm, her hand trembling but full of gratitude. No words were needed. He had saved her child. The next days brought change. The fever faded, color returned to the child's face. Laughter returned in soft bursts, but with each smile, John felt the bond deepen. He was no longer just a miner sneaking food. He was their lifeline, their protector, their family. Still, danger grew heavier. John's absence during nights was noticed, his weight loss sharper. The foreman's eyes lingered on him, suspicious. Whispers spread among workers about stolen supplies. One man muttered, "Someone's hiding something." John kept his face calm, but fear gnawed at him. One mistake, one careless step, and the secret would unravel. Yet, in the hollow, fear faded into warmth. The child began to follow John's gestures. Copying his words, it tried to say, "John," the sound broken, but clear enough to make him smile. The mother no longer watched him with suspicion. Her gaze was softer now, steady, carrying something new. Trust, perhaps even hope. One evening, as stars lit the sky, John watched the child chase shadows with the broken scanner he had given. Its laughter filled the hollow, light and free. The mother sat beside John, silent, but then she did something unexpected. She placed her hand over her heart, then pointed at him. A single gesture, simple yet powerful. John's throat tightened. He understood she was telling him he had become part of them that night. As he walked back to the outpost, the truth struck him hard. This was no longer just kindness, no longer just duty. He cared for them more than he ever thought possible. They were no longer strangers, no longer aliens. They were family, but family came with risk. The patrols were increasing. Scanning deeper into the desert, the miners' whispers grew louder, and John knew the next step was coming. Soon he would face a choice, to let them go and protect himself, or to hold on and risk everything. As he lay in his bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, the choice already formed inside him. He could not let them face the galaxy alone, not after what he had seen, not after what they had shared. His life was no longer his own. It belonged to them. The turning point had come, and there was no going back. The days at the mining outpost dragged on like heavy chains. Machines roared, drills shook the ground, and men cursed the dust. But for John, every sound of the worksite was drowned by the echo of another world. The hollow in the desert, the mother and child waiting for him. His body was there in the mines, but his heart had already left. The fever had passed. The child was strong again. Its laughter filled the hollow like music. The mother's eyes were brighter too, no longer dulled by fear, but John's heart was not at ease. He knew his time was running out. The contract was nearly finished. Soon the company would send a shuttle to take workers back to Earth. Most miners counted the days with joy, eager to leave the barren world behind. But John dreaded the thought. Leaving meant safety. Leaving meant freedom, but leaving also meant abandoning them each night. He watched the child sleep curled against its mother. Each night he felt the weight of his choice pressing harder. Could he walk away? Could he return to Earth and live with the memory of their trust, their smiles, their survival? No, he thought, his chest heavy. No, I cannot. But the risk grew larger with every sunrise. Patrols circled lower, their scanners burning across the rocks. One evening, John heard voices near the ridges as he returned from the hollow. Two miners stood with rifles. Searching the ground, tracks here, one said. Something's been moving out here at night, the other muttered. John's breath froze. He crouched behind the rocks, waiting until they left. But his hands shook the whole walk back to the outpost. The noose was tightening. At work, whispers grew sharper. The foreman cornered him one afternoon, his eyes cold. You're different, John, he said. You eat less, you vanish at night. What are you hiding? John forced a laugh. Nothing, just tired. But he could see the doubt in the man's face. The truth was too close now. That evening, when John reached the hollow, the mother knew something was wrong. She read it in his eyes, in the tension of his hands. He sat down hard on the rock, running a hand through his hair. They're looking, he whispered, though she could not understand his words. Still, she understood his fear. She held the child close, her face pale, her body trembling. John wanted to promise safety, but the lie caught in his throat. The world outside was too cruel, too watchful. The next night, as the stars spread across the sky, John spoke aloud, his voice low, heavy with the truth he carried. My contract is ending, he said. They'll take me away soon. The child tilted its head, not understanding. The mother's gaze stayed fixed on his, silent, waiting. John's throat tightened. I can leave, and you'll be alone again, he whispered. Or I can stay and risk everything. The words hung in the cold air. It was the choice he could no longer ignore. For hours, he sat with them, staring at the stars. The child played with the broken scanner, humming softly. The mother traced small shapes in the dirt, as if remembering. Her lost world. John's chest ached as he watched. They had lost everything, and yet they still lived. Still hoped, still trusted him. Could he turn his back now? Could he walk away to comfort while they faced death? No, his heart answered. No, never. The following day at the mines. John's decision grew clearer when the siren sounded at noon. Signaling the arrival of supply ships, the men cheered. The shuttle would not be far behind. Freedom was coming, but John felt only dread. Freedom for him meant doom for them. His hands tightened on the wrench, and in that moment, his path became clear. That night, he carried more food than usual. More blankets, even tools, when he entered the hollow. The child ran to him, laughing. John dropped the pack and pulled them both close. His arms shaking with the weight of his choice, he whispered, "I will not leave you." The words were soft, but his voice trembled with resolve. The mother froze, her eyes wide. She touched his face, searching as if to see if he meant it. John nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, pointing to himself. Then to them, together, the mothers. Eyes filled with tears, the child laughed, pressing its small hand to John's chest. And in that moment, his decision became more than thought. It became truth, but the truth came with danger. If he stayed, he could not hide forever. He would need a plan, food, shelter, safety beyond the hollow. The desert was not safe. The outpost was not safe. The patrols never rested, yet, for the first time, John felt no fear of the risk. He had chosen his family, even if they were not human. Even if the whole galaxy turned against him. That night, as he walked back to his shelter, the stars above seemed different. Not cold, not empty. They seemed full of promise, because his life no longer belonged to Earth, or to the mines, or to the company. It belonged to them, the mother. The child, the fragile bond, stronger than fear. He whispered to himself as the night wind carried the sound away. "I will protect them, whatever it takes," and in his heart, the decision burned like fire. A fire that no storm, no patrol, no law could ever put out. The desert night was colder than ever. John stood at the edge of the hollow, staring at the stars above. Each one shimmered like 1,000 choices. Distant and unreachable, his contract was nearly over. The shuttle would arrive soon. The decision pressed on him like a weight too heavy to carry. Behind him, the child laughed softly. Chasing shadows on the rock, the mother sat quietly, watching, tired eyes filled with both trust and sorrow. They did not know about the shuttle, not fully. They did not know that soon John was expected to leave, but they sensed something. The air carried tension, the silence too sharp. John sat down beside them, his heart heavy. The child climbed into his lap, small fingers tugging at his shirt. Its warmth filled him with both joy and pain. Because he knew this was not temporary anymore. This was home, the mother reached out. Resting her hand on the child's back, her gaze fixed on John, steady, questioning. John swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to speak, to tell them what burned in his chest, but words felt too small, too fragile, still. He had to try. He took a deep breath. "I want you to stay," he whispered. The child tilted its head, confused. The mother's eyes narrowed. Searching his face, John placed a hand on his chest, then pointed at them. "Stay with me, forever." The words trembled in the air, heavy with meaning. For a moment, silence hung between them. The mother's eyes filled with tears, her lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came. Instead, she leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently against his hand, a gesture of trust, a gesture of acceptance. The child laughed, wrapping its small arms around his neck. And John felt his heart break open with something he had not felt in years. Love, but love was never simple. The world outside was still cruel, still watching. If patrols found them, if miners followed, everything would collapse. John knew his choice came with danger. Yet, as he looked at them, he realized something clear. Life without them was no life at all. The next days passed in a blur. He prepared. Quietly gathering food, water, tools, anything he could steal without notice, he stored them near the hollow. Hidden under stones, the mother helped. Though her body was weak, her spirit burned strong. The child carried small things, smiling, proud to be part of the secret. Together they worked. Together they planned. It no longer felt like survival. It felt like a family building a future. But suspicion grew at the outpost. The foreman's eyes followed John everywhere. Whispers grew louder. Talk of missing supplies. One night, a patrol ship circled low over the desert. Its light cutting across the ridges. John froze, his heart hammering. The beam passed close, too close, but somehow missed the hollow. Still, John knew it would not last. The hunters were coming. Sooner than he wished, that night he returned to the hollow with urgency. He sat with the mother and child, his hands shaking. "We must go," he whispered, pointing to the horizon. "Not tomorrow, not next week, now." The mother's eyes widened, fear flashing, but she nodded, her trust unbroken. The child pressed against his chest, silent for once, as if sensing the danger too. They moved at dawn. When the desert was still, John carried the pack. The mother held the child close. Every step was heavy, every shadow a threat. The silence of the desert roared in his ears. Behind them, the outpost faded. A prison they would never return to as the sun rose higher. They reached a ridge that looked out across the endless horizon. The sky stretched wide. The stars beyond calling. John stopped, his chest heaving with breath. He looked at them, the fragile family beside him, and the truth burned clear in his heart. This was the moment, the forever choice. He knelt down, pulling the child close. He looked at the mother. His voice soft but strong. "I cannot promise safety. I cannot promise peace," he whispered. "But I can promise you this. You will never be alone again." The mother's eyes filled with tears. She reached out, taking his hand, pressing it against her heart. The child laughed, wrapping both arms around them, and in that embrace, John knew the choice was already made, not by words, but by love. The desert stretched around them. Endless and harsh, the patrols would still hunt. The dangers would still rise. But in that moment, none of it mattered, because they were together, a man, an alien mother, and her child, bound not by blood but by kindness, bound by something stronger than fear, stronger than law, stronger than the cold stars above. John lifted his gaze to the horizon, his arms around them both, and he whispered the words once more. "Stay with me, forever." The mother nodded, silent tears falling. The child laughed, its voice bright as the dawn, and together they stepped forward into the unknown, not as strangers, not as survivors, but as family.